Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Zach, and this is going to be a deck tech breakdown of my Black Vinegar Tough Enuff deck. Notably, this deck can be adapted for standard play pretty easily, and I'll talk about that a little bit as we go. But it's a really fun deck to play, and I think it's relatively strong in Tough Enuff. And so, yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So as you guys can see here, we are on Black Trunk Style Mastery with Roshi Sensei. The two of these combine for a ton of damage when combined with our level 1, which is Vinegar High Tech level 1. Basically, you get a Krell and Seeking Blast attached to your main personality. And then in combination with the Mastery and Roshi Sensei, it's going to be an unstoppable 6 life cards one stage every time, which is really powerful. We do only play 3 personality levels because we are Tough Enuff. I think if you're playing Standard, you want to find room for Vinegar level 4 just so you don't get cheese 1 through 3 MPTV'd. Level 2 Vinegar, not great. Energy attacks do +1 stage of damage, which with the Mastery can be a respectable amount of chip damage. Notably, you do have 3 POR, which is nice. And so we do want to avoid getting leveled up to level 2, which in Tough Enuff with Are You Tough Enuff and Aura Clash flying around, it's easier said than done sometimes, but it is winnable when you're on level 2. I have won Tough Enuff games on level 2, but it's much harder, obviously. You want to be on level 1 when you can. Level 3, I've never ended up on this stage, and you just play it because you have to, basically. And there's not really much to say about that. So yeah, this is the stack, and really the main crux of the deck is that between your Mastery, your Sensei, and your level 1, you can pump out pretty consistent damage without very many resources, so it lets you play more tech cards, more blocks, notably. We'll kind of go over those as we go along. Alright, so first up is our energy attacks. This section, I guess, is sort of the mostly damage-focused energy attacks or combat-focused energy attacks. We'll start off with 3 Black Chaos Detonation. Obviously, a really good staple for Black. Discarding cards is incredible. The Mastery makes this also add up to quite a bit of damage, and we won't talk about that for every card, but just keep in mind that all your Black attacks are doing an extra 2 life cards, 2 stages, 3 life cards with the Roshi. So energy attacks that are only base are hitting for 7 and 2 if they're Black, which is really nice. And obviously making them discard 2 cards if successful is really huge. Sometimes they don't have a block, and they just dump 2 cards out of their hand if you enter combat, which is really nice. Tough Enuff is a little more hostile to this card because people are playing more blocks than they would in Standard, especially other aggro decks are, so that's one thing to keep in mind, but I think it's pretty hard to get away from 3 of these in the deck. Next up, we got Black Exertion. This is hilariously a card I was not playing originally when I first built this deck for Standard, but I think it's too good to get rid of. Preventing Endurance in Tough Enuff especially is really powerful because Are You Tough Enuff is running around very commonly at 3 of, and being able to blast through that threshold for Endurance is really nice with your power. Notably, your power, unlike the next card I'll talk about, Krell and Seeking Blast, does not prevent damage. So having this plus your power sort of turns it into a true Heat Seeker, which is really, really nice. One small thing is that with the Empowered 3, it becomes an energy for 10 life cards in 2 stages, which is really big. Heat Seeker, again, much like your power, 6 and 1, guaranteed, consistent damage. This is actually a card I've been cutting from a lot of energy attacking decks, because I've just found that I need more and more and more utility over time, and this card ends up getting cut because it's just damage at the end of the day. But it's very consistent damage, and this deck, I think, plays it particularly well, so I'm not going to complain about having it here. I guess next section is sort of our more utility-based attacks. We will start with an NZ4 card, or NZ3 card rather. So for those not familiar with Z League, we have our own custom set of cards called NZ. If you're familiar with Panini, has Fan Z that sort of was a continuation of Panini Z after the game stopped being printed by fans, and similarly, Retro had their virtual cards around 2012 through 2015. That was a continuation of Score Z. We basically decided to do the same thing, only these are just, they're not the same cards as those 2 sets. So we allow these, we do not allow the virtual cards currently. and scorecards. So this is sort of a supplementary thing to help freshen up the metagame for you know, as we keep playing this game, you know, 20 years after the metagame's been established. So this card, notably, Black Vegeta's Gallic Gun, has a new mechanic for NZ called Transform, so I'll explain it here. Transform is similar, if you've played Magic before, it's similar to Flashback, or I guess Jumpstart is a more specific thing that it's more similar to. Basically, Transform allows you to discard a card that has a matching type, so in this case Energy Combat, and Style, in this case Black, from your hand to play this card directly out of your discard pile. And then you can only play it when the card would make sense to play. So for this card, it's an energy attack, so you do it during your attacker's attacks phase. So you have to have, again, Black Energy Combat to play this. All Transform cards automatically have removed from the game after use on them. And they also have them printed on it, but that's just a general rule. So you can't just keep reusing them out of your discard. This card is an energy for 5, which is solid. You know, Mastery adds up on that. But also, you can mill yourself for 4 to discard up to 2 non-combats or allies. So this is really clutch. It's tough enough. It's really nice to have access to Ally Hate. This card's even better because it just sits in your discard pile until you need it. And then when you absolutely need it, hey, you know, sweep away their allies, sweep away their non-combat. Nice. Next up, Kid Boo's Prep Crash. So speaking of Transform, because Transform is a main mechanic in NZ, Kid Boo's Prep Crash is really, really clutch, because discard piles are at an all-time premium. You know, obviously you have Transform, which we briefly touched on. That's a huge mechanic, but there's also so many other decks that just care about their discard pile. Famously, James has played Red Boo with cookies and the level 4 and 5 Fat Boos that allow you to rejuvenate lots of cards. Outside of Tuff Enuff, Thomas has played Namekian Piccolo deck that rejuvenates lots and lots of cards. You know, even just simple things like other black decks have Buffer Block. You want to be able to get rid of their discard pile to prevent them from buying cards off of Buffer Block back. Red has Red Axe Heel Kick. So there's just many decks that care about their discard pile. You know, things like getting rid of arching allies, so they can't buy them back with Gathering of Heroes. So all these things add up, and I pretty much always am playing 3 Prep Crash and decks where it makes sense nowadays because of that. Our last 2 sort of techie attacks, we got Android 19's Energy Burst. This was sort of a concession to some side events where I was losing to. The only decks I lost to were a freestyle deck based on Goku's Farewell, getting to level 4 Goku World Game Saga and putting a bunch of drills into play, and an orange drill-based deck were the 2 decks that I lost to in the side events leading into the main event. So this was sort of a concession to those. And then our last slot was a card this started at 3 of in the first versions of this deck, because I think this card is underplayed in energy-based decks. Bojack's Palm Charge, it adds so much extra damage, especially with an Unstoppable Power as your main attack. All of a sudden, instead of doing 6 and 1, it's doing 8 and 1. Unstoppable, which is crazy. This card ultimately got cut because at the end of the day, it's just damage, it's conditional damage, and I just needed more and more tech cards like 19's Energy Burst and Prep Crash, things of that nature. And also, because of the Transform mechanic, it's important to have black energy combats in this deck, which we'll touch more on the second Transforming card later. So all those reasons basically amounted to me only playing 1 Palm Charge. This card's interesting because initially I only ever saw people playing this card in Bojack decks, but it actually makes less sense in that deck than a regular energy attacking deck. Mostly because in those decks you have multiple allies in play, so you're not always throwing attacks with one particular personality. It makes a little bit more sense, in my opinion, to attach this to just your MP, and then you're just throwing lots of energy attacks with your MP specifically. But yeah, it's a very solid card. So next section is sort of our get to sort of the theme of the deck, which is we are Stop All Tribal. Stop Alls are incredibly powerful, and Black gets access to a bevy of attacks that act as Stop Alls. So we're going to start with Vegeta's Jolting Slash. One of many reasons to be a villain in this situation. Jolting Slash is just so powerful. Physical attack, your energy attack stops all physicals against villains. Notably, that stops all of our physicals, but we don't have as many as our opponent does most of the time. So, really clutch card. This card can save you lots and lots of damage during combat. Also can lower their anger too in a pinch, which is really nice. Next we have its cousin, Black Energy Web. Black Energy Web, massive attack, 6 life cards plus your mastery, and Sensei is really big. If successful, which is a little less good, but energy blocks tend to be a little less important than physical blocks for energy decks, because they need so many physical blocks to prevent themselves from getting stage locked. So this card will often hit and prevents them from even playing their energy combat cards. Last in the trio of these cards, Black Defensive Burst, also huge, sort of the sister to Jolting Slash. In some situations it can be better, because if you're stage locked, for example, you can actually still use this, because it's a physical attack. And it does life cards of damage directly, which again with the mastery adds up, so it's actually better that this is a physical that does just straight life cards of damage rather than physical stages, because we don't actually do that much stage damage in this deck despite having the mastery. The 3 of these combine to, you can enter multiple combats where your opponent just never gets the chance to throw an attack, which is really nice. So these are really clutch. On the theme of attacks that are secretly defensive, we got our last 2 energy attacks. We have a Black Turning Kick and a Black Knife Hand Strike. These are Saiyan Saga cards that I've always loved. The exact numbers of these you're playing, I think you could play as many of 2 of each of them to 0 of either of them. You could play 3 of one and 0 of the other. There's a lot of configurations for these. Black Knife Hand Strike was ultimately a concession to Orange Ginyu Flash Attack, which is an NZ card I'll put on screen right now that really buffed Orange Ginyu Force, because it's an absolutely massive attack that they always have access to. And it can do lots of damage with West City, plus Ginyu adds 4 virtual allies to play. Captain Air Ginyu Force, I should say. So this is sort of a concession to that. Hilariously, the 2 people who played that deck, because there's 2 people playing that deck in the metagame, didn't play in this event at all, so those didn't end up being as relevant. But, obviously in a pinch, it's still an attack or a block when you need it. It's also a Black Energy Combat card, which again, our transform cards are energy combats. Next up, we have 3 Black Body Destruction. I think this is probably among the highest played cards percentage-wise in Black deck. I can't imagine a Black deck that doesn't play 3 copies of this card. It's great, obviously it's a block or an attack, much like the other 2. In this deck, it's 95% of the time a block, but there's some situations where you get their last card out of their hand that's nice, or you're playing against an energy deck and you need to stage lock them out of throwing any more attacks, because the physical block is less relevant, and then obviously discarding cards at random is insane. And then lastly, we have Triple Underdog Dropkick. This is a card I was not playing originally in this build. I was playing Black Duck, or Ducking Technique, I think it is, one of the 2 of those. It's like a World Game Saga attack that gains you a bunch of stages, but it only is a physical block. This is actually clutch against energy attacking decks, where there's situations that come up where you stage lock yourself because you're performing so many energies, so having a few extra stages on a block is really nice, and it's sort of a sub-theme of the blocks you'll see in the deck. In a pinch, you can also attack somebody, again, similar situation to Body Destruction, where if they're an energy deck, you can attack them off their stages, because you get an extra stage bonus off your mastery. And having Endurance 1 and going to the bottom of your life deck after use is really nice, and we're always under 500,000 in this deck, which is cool. So those are the other sort of attacks that are more defensive. Our last actual attacks in the deck, we got 3 Black Right Kick. I think this is the main reason why most black decks tend to be villains, because you get access to this card. It's buffer block returnable, which is really nice. In a pinch, if they're out of cards, the +3 life cards off the Empower is really clutch. And I'm only playing 2 Black Swivel attacks. I think, I don't know, these cards are interesting. I think Swivel attack's better in a vacuum, especially because almost always you're not empowering the right kick. But the extra endurance on this, plus the fact that you can return this to buffer block, but you cannot return this. I needed to find an extra slot for what ended up being probably the 19's Energy Burst. I think this is the card I ended up cutting for it. I think it's entirely possible this card should be at 3. This is more of a very minor tweak I had to make to the deck for what I thought the metagame was going to be. So I think playing this at 3 is perfectly fine. These are physical attacks, the deck's mostly energy based, but with the mastery, these still do a few life cards, especially if you happen to empower the right kick. So, but these are more focused on reducing the amount of damage you're taking by removing cards from their hand, and they're still proactive cards, which is nice. So yeah, obvious inclusions there. Next up, we will go to the blocking suite, and as I alluded to earlier, your main personality really allows you to play way more blocks than the average deck would, which for Tuff Enuff is great. So we'll start with the stop balls, because we are, after all, stop ball tribal. Timer's Warrior Stool, obvious. Every deck's playing this card. Play it. Be happy about it. Next, we got Cell's Defense. A late addition, but one that I ultimately decided was pertinent because just having physical stop balls is really important for this deck. In the pinch, you can block energies, but you'd really rather not. The other cool thing is, because your main personality power is unstoppable, like there's combats where like you're perfectly fine if the only attack you perform all combat is your power, and you just block everything else. Trading 6 life cards for nothing is great. So there's situations that come up where you would definitely be willing to block all energies with this. Speaking of blocking all energies, we got Black Protection Orb. This card, most of the time, because we don't play Hat in our deck, this card, 95% of the time, is just an energy stop ball because we have a huge Sensei deck that we don't care about any particular cards living through. And Nappa's Energy Org is obviously playing all the Saiyan Saga stop balls. The last two, obviously, are the Vegeta and Nappa's Physical Resistance and Stance, respectively. Gotta play them. Physical stop balls are at a premium, so can't complain about playing those. Then the rest of the blocks, so we got our Omni blocks first, so we're playing 3 black buffer blocks. We've been talking about this multiple times with multiple cards. Buying back an extra card is enormous, especially if it's something like a Body Destruction that's also a block, or we have a couple other options in that department, so this deck really, really wants to block a lot, because it just wants to have stages for all its attacks. Next up is probably my favorite card in NZ, Black Aura Eruption. This card is the second transform card we've been talking about, also is a black energy combat, much like the Gallic Gun, so having a lot of black energy combats is really high premium in this deck. This card is transform, which we talked about earlier. You have to discard if it's in my discard pile, I can discard a black energy combat card to play it directly out of my discard pile. Obviously, if it's in your hand, you can just play it normally. This one is an Omni block that gains 5 stages, and RT the bottom 5 of their discard pile. Gaining 5 stages is enormous because you just desperately need stages in this deck at all times. This is really good because there are combats that will happen where you didn't draw so well. Maybe you're really low on stages, but you can convert a useless attack in your hand because your energy attacks are often the ones that are stranded in your hand when you have no stages, and convert that into more stages so you can actually perform another attack like your power. The other cool thing is that there's some combats where like you enter combat, you get down to 0, they deal a few life cards to you, and they flip one of these. Then all of a sudden later in the combat you block, and then all of a sudden you're turning it around on them. Maybe you have to throw like a chaos detonation that you didn't have the stages for otherwise, and all of a sudden their combat ended up being not as good as they thought it was going to be. So yeah, really good. Can't complain. Also keep in mind we have the underdog drop kicks are sort of additional Omni blocks in this deck that also gain stages. Speaking of gaining stages, 3 Pycon's Leg Catch. Yeah, this is probably the most played card in the game. It's damn close, probably top 3. Every deck wants this card. Stages is too powerful, and shuffling 3 is obviously a huge bonus. But against the physical attacking decks, like, you just prevent so much damage with this card. Its twin sister, Goku's Quick Dodge, not nearly as good because you, preventing 1 stage from their future attacks is much less powerful than rejuvenating 3 cards back into your deck. But it's obviously great, you just gain the stages back up. And then last block in the deck is Black Recovery. This card is good. I think you could definitely get away with playing less Black Recoveries than this. Ultimately, I went with the full package of them because it's a Black Energy Combat card, which matters for the 2 Transform cards, notably. So I play this over something like Black Parry, which I know some people like because that one's randomly a physical combat for no reason. And I think that forcing them to discard a card from their hand is going to represent more damage a lot of the time than it would if you were rejuvenating 3 cards. And I talk about this a lot, where like in this deck you will get stage locked on occasion and you can't perform many attacks, so converting your dead cards in your hand that you can't perform into some sort of advantage, in this case turning it into a card that discards a card out of their hand, can be really nice. So I think having the 3 Black Recoveries is completely fine. Also, you can get this card back with Buffer Block, which is nice. That's all for the attacks, and next we'll go over the combats. We'll keep the gravy train rolling for effects that stop things. Super Saiyan effect, sort of a, the honorary last stop all, and obviously great against physical attacking decks. You just need it. Next, we have Android 17 Smirks. This was a concession to Orange and Freestyle especially. I ended up main decking this. I think I much prefer main decking this card in Standard than Tuff Enuff, but because I was losing to these drill decks, I just decided I had to have it. Next up, we have 2 Trunks Energy Spheres. Why 2, you might ask? Well, we have the third one here with Black Negation. So NZ introduced a styled sphere for each color that RFGs itself after use, but has some other additional beneficial effect. This is Black's version, which makes them shuffle their hand into their deck and draw 1 less card. So if they only have 1 card left, hey, they have no hand. They have to shuffle it in. So it can also mess up like really carefully sculpted hands, like if they have like a Vegeta's Quickness Drill drawing them a card, or having Fatherly Advice or something like that can be really nice. Ultimately, I'm playing these spheres mostly to counteract Are You Tough Enuffs and Aura Clashes, and I didn't feel like I needed a 4th sphere, so I just played the 3. So a very common thing I will do is I'll play 2 spheres and cut the last one for the negation of that style. Last card of the combats, Android 18 Stare Down. This is, I think, the other main reason why Black Villain is so good compared to Black Hero, because in Hero you have to play Confrontation in this slot, which you cannot get back with Black Buffer Block. Being a villain is a huge advantage because this card is triggered from Black Buffer Block, so you can get it back, which is really nice. And yeah, you just gotta play Stare Downs. They're good. Alright, that's it for the combats. Last is sort of all of the non-combat step cards. We'll start with the drills. We're going to start with our bevy of sort of card advantage cards. We got Black Takedown Drill, Black Smoothness Drill, Vegeta's Quickness Drill. Vegeta's Quickness Drill needs an introduction. Drawing an extra card when entering combat is enormous. This deck doesn't have very many non-combats in it, so you're often drawing a live card. Smoothness Drill is really good because the combat you play this, you're probably going to be able to pass in combat anyway, so keeping 2 cards is really nice, and then, yeah, it gives you lots of options to keep up with, like, Saiyan hands. Takedown Drill I'm playing, and this is something where I'm not playing Champ Drill in this deck. And you very well could, but I ended up cutting a lot of the drills out of this deck, and Champ Drill ended up being the one I decided to cut over Takedown, ultimately because I didn't want to spend an entire action just using Champ Drill, because you end up in situations where, like, you Champ Drill, like, looking to hit a block or something like that, and then you, like, can't even perform an attack later in the combat anyways, because you didn't hit it. So I ended up going for Takedown Drill because of that, because your power is so consistently unstoppable that you can almost always end up snagging a card off of this. Next up, we got Black Weakness Drill. Probably one of the best cards in the format, top 10 easily. And yeah, I only played 1. There was a previous iteration of this deck that was for Standard that I played way more drills, but because you're villain, you don't get to play Caught Off Guard Drill, and because you don't get to play Caught Off Guard Drill, protecting your drills is way more difficult, and there's so many non-combat answers, and the people who are good players are playing a lot of them because you just need them in Standard, especially with Orange and G-Ball and Freestyle running around. So I ended up cutting many drills from this deck, and you have to play Weakness Drill because it's too strong not to, but it gets killed very frequently, so I only ended up playing the 1. You could definitely cut a couple of these other cards and find room for more copies of this card if you want. Black Erasing Drill, again, huge concession to Freestyle and Orange. Again, with your power, much like Takedown Drill, you're going to very consistently be able to hit 1 attack per combat, so you can almost always get a successful energy attack off, and if you manage to be able to hit more of them, that's even more attacks you're hitting. Really cool, you can hit 20 Absorbing Drill with this card because your power is unstoppable, which is really nice. So being able to hit their Absorbing Drill, getting that out of the way with is really important. Lastly, of our drills, we have Vic Drill, staple in all decks. Cards that start and play are powerful, you need to play them. I'm not playing You're Invited in this deck because I don't really need the effect so much because I'm often the one passing in combat, but the extra stages is really important for this, and then yeah, if you hit any random anger, that's just gravy. Last non-combat is One Fatherly Advice. This is the Z-League promo version, and yeah, Fatherly is just really important. It's Demonic Tutor for those that are familiar with Magic, and yeah, really strong card. And then we are playing 2 Dragon Balls. Dende Dragon Ball 4 was born out of the fact that Before Black Vegeta's Gallic Gun got printed, this deck was very soft to allies, especially main deck cards that you could play. So I ended up playing Dende 4 as a concession to that. Powering up the foe is also really nice for this deck because you always want stages, so these come up pretty often. The last one is Dende 5, alternate Dende 5, gives you PR plus 3. Vinegar only has base PR 1, which after Tokuwaza is 2. So having extra PR is really nice. The other cool thing about these two balls, and why I play them over other balls, is because I actually don't care about either of these ones getting stolen. I actually played Dende 3 and a couple of other Dende balls at one point, but I decided against it because there's so many balls that if they get stolen are terrible, because like they draw 3 cards and then you just die. And you can steal balls back consistently, but if they steal it back again, then that's when you just lose the game, because they have like a 10 card say in hand or whatever, and you just lose because they stole your ball 3 or whatever. So these balls are both nice in which that, because I'm mostly energy based, them gaining stages is not super relevant. It's mostly helpful like for energy attacking decks to steal these, but physical attacking decks, stealing them is mostly just bad because I'll steal them back later and gain the stages right back. So I actually don't mind that at all. Last card in the deck, and this is actually a card that if I was playing Standard would probably be a different card. I'm playing 3 Winter Countrysides. This is mostly to do with Aura Clash and Are You Tough Enough being so prevalent in Tuff Enuff, where I really don't want to be on level 2. I have been able to win on level 2, but you just rather be on level 1. And hey, if you can slow down decks that want to level in this format, decks like Pui, decks like the Frieza deck that's running around, although many of those decks are playing Goku Sensei because it's tough enough anyways. But yeah, slowing Anger down is huge. Turning their clashes off is huge. And you play a few drills, so you just want to be on level 1. You don't want your drills to go away. So yeah, 3 Winter Countrysides. In Standard, I would actually consider trying to find room for City and Turmoil instead, even though you play a handful of non-combats yourself. Like City, you know, drill decks are just really hard to beat, so having City is really huge. That's it for the main deck, and we'll go over the Sensei deck options now. So my Sensei deck is largely informed by some of the side events I played leading into the main event, where I was losing mostly to orange and to freestyle drill decks. We'll start with Black Pivot Kick. Only 2. I originally had 3, but the next card I'll talk about was the reason I cut one of these. Humongous, obviously, card. Hitting non-combats is really huge, and hitting allies is also really big, as Black really lacks, especially before NZ, if you're not playing this deck with any NZ cards in it, really lacked the ability to kill allies consistently outside of this card in the Sensei, which is really nice. So yeah, really big. Also notably, you can get this card back with Pivot Kick, or a Pivot Kick you can get back with Buffer Block, because it has a condition that makes your opponent discard a card, even though it is optional, so it qualifies for Buffer Block. The card that I shaved one of these for was ultimately the second Black Front Punch. This card is obviously excellent. And the fact that I don't care about, I'm not playing Hat in this deck, so I don't care about my Sensei deck at all. I can just get rid of all of it if I need to. Makes this card really strong. Lets you spend an action to RFG and was it drill or non-combat? Just drills, I forget. So it gets around like orange focusing drill, because you're doing them one at a time, so you can get around it. Same thing with Pivot Kick for that matter. Hit multiple drills pretty easily with that. And then freestyle, obviously, you just need to be able to get rid of like their dev drills and stuff like that, or their champ drill. Yeah, it's just really important to get rid of lots of drills, so bringing 2 of these in is really nice. Our last of our sort of like anti-drill package is 1 Frieza's Deception. This is a really underplayed NZ card in my opinion. I think it's probably one of the most powerful NZ cards, although you most often just Sensei deck it. Basically, it cannot be stopped by constant combat powers, like you can't prevent you from playing it, most notably Settle Down, Vegeta Settle Down. Doesn't stop you from playing this, and what it does is you mill yourself for 3 to force them to advance it. Force your opponent to advance a personality level. This gets around Winter Countryside, so against drill-based decks like Orange, all their drills are gone, which is really nice. And so this is probably more relevant in Standard, where non-combat decks are more reliable. But yeah, people can definitely play these types of decks. I actually brought this in against Saiyan Brawly because I needed him to not be on level 2 the whole game, because if he camps on level 2, he's just beefing me every single turn. So having a card that got them off level 2 in a pinch was really nice. And yeah, there's some decks that just don't want to be on level powerful too, and so having that card is kind of nice. Next up, we've talked about allies a lot. Allies are pretty popular in Tuff Enuff because you can cut tech slots from your deck that you would normally need to deal with certain like defensive decks for allies. Like you have more room for more allies, so Cell's presence is really huge. And black, like I said before, really lacks ally hate. And then lastly, we have Goku's Quickness Drill. This card's a meta call because the last Tuff Enuff event winner was a black Boo deck that went really well and plays probably like 18 cards and discard cards from your hand. So having access to Quickness Drill is really nice. Goku's Quickness Drill for that reason is really nice. Plus, if you ever get the second copy in play, they probably just lose if they don't get rid of it. So yeah, that's really the deck. Changes that we consider making. I think the real big flex slots for Tuff Enuff specifically: Smirks, 17 Smirks, 19's Energy Burst, the Bojack's Left Palm Charge. Those are the main flex slots. Cards I was considering in those slots would be extra black weaknesses, the third black Swivel Kick, and there's a couple of NZ cards that I considered in retrospect, knowing how the format went, where I lost mostly to Saiyan decks that were beefing me. There's two cards in NZ that allow you to sort of get around beef. One of them is Black Realization, which turns all of your opponent's floating effects off for the remainder of combat if you declare Tokawaza. And it also lets you discard a card from your hand to make them discard an extra card. So that can stop their stop alls and stuff like beef or what have you. And then the second one is a very more specifically targeted card, which is Straining Key Build-Up Move. This card, it's got a lot of text, but the short version of it is it ends their beef, because that's really the only card that cares about that effect. So cards that prevent you from gaining stages don't work anymore. The floating effects don't work anymore. You gain a bunch of stages, and then if you're familiar with the card Gohan's Hidden Power, where you can basically, instead of paying stages, you can mill yourself life cards to perform attacks. You can sort of do the similar thing, like when you go to attack, you can mill yourself any number of cards to basically gain that many stages before you perform the attack. So you can actually gain extra stages, unlike the Gohan card, where you can only gain exactly as many as the cost of the attack. This one lets you gain a few bonus ones for the remainder of combat. And then the drawbacks on that card, going to 0 and then discarding all of your allies, don't really matter too much for this deck without all the other stage gain. So I think that in a pinch, you could definitely try to find room for those, maybe in the Sensei deck. Because this deck struggles against Saiyan, and there was 2 Saiyan decks that beat me in the Swiss. That was ultimately why I didn't make top cut, and it was both of them was because I got Saiyan beat for multiple turns in a row. So, yeah, this deck's great. Mostly, the worst matchup by far is Saiyan, but I think outside of Saiyan, you have a puncher's chance against every other deck in the format, and even against Saiyan, I managed to keep it close both times. So it's winnable, but you have to really rely on them not beefing you for like multiple turns in a row. You can handle getting beefed once, but you can't handle getting beat for like 3 combats or 2 combats. It's often game over. Yeah, that's the deck, and that's mostly what it is. If there's any questions, feel free to ping me on Discord.